Hi everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Je vais juste donner quelques secondes pour que les gens se connectent à l'audio. I'm just giving everyone a chance to connect to audio. Right, it looks like people are very quick to connect to their audio. Kwek Akina, hello everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. We believe it's important to acknowledge that this event, even as we're gathering virtually today, we are hosting it on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. De nos jours, divers peuples des Premières Nations, des Inuits et des Métis vivent, travaillent et étudient sur ce territoire. Welcome everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to our series, Living Our Values, Inclusion at OPL. This is our second panel in the series. Bienvenue à notre table ronde. My name is Nathan, and I will be your moderator for this panel. I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm a queer, disabled, transgender dad, artist, author, and publisher. I studied various things, including baking, film studies, and design. I was a teacher for a long time before working at my favorite place in the world, which is the library. When I'm not working, I can be found obsessively playing or researching tabletop role-playing games. Alors, je m'appelle Nathan, je suis votre modérateur pour cette table ronde. Je suis un papa, artiste, auteur et éditeur queer, handicapé et transgenre. J'ai étudié la pâtisserie, le cinéma et la bande dessinée. Et j'ai été un enseignant pendant longtemps avant de travailler à ma place préférée au monde, la bibliothèque. Quand je ne travaille pas, je peux être retrouvé en train de jouer à des jeux de rôle. I'm honored to facilitate today. Before I introduce our guests, I have a few housekeeping notes for you. Alors, j'ai quelque chose à vous dire avant de vous présenter nos invités. Each panelist will answer some pre-prepared question. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be posted internally for colleagues who cannot attend. You can add comments in the chat and questions. However, you will notice that your microphones are muted just so that we can all hear each other speak clearly. But do feel free to use the chat. We will save questions from the audience at the end if we have time. However, please feel free to put them in the chat as we can always scroll and see them so you don't forget them. There will be some time allowed for question and answer at the very end. Alors, il va y avoir un petit peu de temps à la fin pour pouvoir poser vos questions, mais n'hésitez pas à utiliser le clavardage si vous avez des questions, des commentaires. On les voit à travers la table ronde. And now I am pleased to introduce our amazing panelists. They represent various voices as they come from our 2S LGBTQIA+ community at large, and we are grateful and honored that they are joining us today and sharing their experiences. Alors, je vais vous présenter nos invités qui représentent différentes sections de la communauté 2S LGBTQIA+, et qui vont partager nos expériences avec vous aujourd'hui. En partant, on a Carmen, qui est une militante qui revendique pour la justice sociale depuis plusieurs décennies. Un exemple est en tant que présidente de Égalité pour les gays et les lesbiennes, ou Égale Canada. Fière franco-ontarienne, elle milite maintenant au sein de la FARFO, la Fédération des aînés et des retraités franco-ontariennes, et du réseau de la Fierté des aînés d'Ottawa. Carmen is an activist who has been fighting for social justice for several decades. One example of this activism is her tenure as president of Égalité pour les gays et lesbiennes, Égale Canada. A proud Franco-Ontarian, Carmen is actively involved with FARFO, la Fédération des aînés et des retraités franco-ontariennes, and in the Ottawa Senior Pride Network. Welcome, Carmen. Bienvenue, Carmen. Next, I have Roxy. Roxy, she, they, is also known as DJ Roxy Sunset, is a queer DJ from Ottawa who remixes songs with a positive message and puts her skill to creating events and safe spaces for queer people in Ottawa. At the 2023 Ottawa Awards, Roxy made history as the first queer female DJ to win Ottawa's Best DJ. A member of the Affirm Committee of the United Church of Canada, they give workshops in 2S LGBTQIA+, inclusivity and faith. Roxy, elle, également connue sous le nom de DJ Roxy Sunset, est une DJ queer d'Ottawa qui remixe des chansons à message positif et met ses compétences au service de la création d'événements et d'espaces sûrs pour les personnes queer. Lors des les Ottawa Awards 2023, Roxy est devenue la première femme DJ queer à remporter le prix du meilleur DJ d'Ottawa. Membre du comité afin de l'Église unie du Canada, elle donne des ateliers sur l'inclusion et la foi des 2SLGBTQIA+. Next, we have Jodan. Jodan, sorry. Jodan is a bisexual, trans, old white dude who transitioned 25 years ago and is the father of 2 young adults. His political activism is an extension of his direct personal involvement with groups and people in everyday life. Listening to people, understanding their perspective, finding common ground, and sharing is part of the important work that leads to softening the hard lines that divide so many people from each other. Alors, Jodan est un homme transgenre blanc et bisexuel d'un certain âge et le père de 2 jeunes adultes. Il a transitionné il y a 25 ans. Son militantisme politique est le résultat de son engagement direct et personnel auprès de groupes et de personnes dans la vie quotidienne. Écouter les gens, comprendre leur point de vue et trouver un terrain d'entente et partager font partie du travail important qui permet d'adoucir les lignes dures qui divisent tant de gens les uns des autres. Next, we have... Oh, bienvenue, Jodan. Welcome. Next, we have Trevor. Trevor Jones is a 23-year-old non-binary creator. They have spent the last couple of years discovering who they truly are, finding their happiness, and focusing on building a positive, inclusive, and diverse community in every aspect of life, as well as being able to help build a better culture in their workplace. Trevor Jones est un créateur non-binaire de 23 ans. Elle a passé les 2 dernières années à découvrir qui elle est vraiment, à trouver un bonheur et à se concentrer sur la construction d'une communauté positive, inclusive et diversifiée dans tous les aspects de la vie, y compris son milieu de travail. Bienvenue, Trevor. Welcome. Angela Jones is a co-facilitator of the City of Ottawa's Rainbow Employees Network, a later-in-life lesbian and a relentless advocate for diversity and inclusion. A social worker who has spent many years working with queer youth, she is the mother of 2 amazing humans, one of whom is non-binary. She is a certified cool mom and ardent pug enthusiast. I am also a pug enthusiast. Une travailleuse sociale qui travaillait pendant des années auprès des jeunes 2SLGBTQIA+, Angela est aussi la co-facilitatrice du réseau Arc-en-Ciel pour les employés de la ville d'Ottawa, qui s'identifie comme étant 2SLGBTQIA+. Elle est lesbienne qui est sortie du placard plus tard dans la vie et la mère de 2 personnes incroyables, dont un enfant non-binaire. Elle milite sans cesse pour la diversité et l'inclusion. Une mère cool certifiée, elle adore les carlins. Bienvenue, Angela. Welcome. All right, so we have, I'm going to invite all my panelists to come back with the spotlight. And we have developed our questions around the theme of 2SLGBTQIA plus representation across the generational gaps, as well as all the perceptions that these different generations may have about one another. We have a couple of questions, which I will ask. So what I will do is I will ask the question both in English and in French, and I'm going to invite the panelists to answer in whichever language they're most comfortable with. All right. Is everybody ready to get started? On est prêt tout le monde? Excellent. N'oubliez pas, si vous voulez mettre des commentaires dans le clavardage, vous pouvez y aller. Don't forget, if you want to put comments in the chat, you can go ahead. All right, my very first question, ma première question. What does 2SLGBTQIA plus representation, and that can be in books and film, mean to you, and how has it impacted your life? Qu'est-ce que la représentation 2SLGBTQIA plus représente pour vous? Et quel genre d'impact ça a eu sur votre vie? All right, why don't we start with Roxy?
Hi, everyone. So for me, being a person of mixed race, I think it was very important to see people of mixed race who are part of the gay community in books or TV. My dad was born in Pakistan and my mom was born in Italy. My dad was Muslim and my mom was Catholic, They weren't very religious, but we did celebrate religious holidays, and I grew up reading the Bible and the Quran, both books telling me that being gay was a sin. I knew at a very young age that I was gay and started dating when I was only 13. The very first TV show I ever watched was The L Word. And since I wasn't in the community at a young age and I was the only gay person at my school, I felt comforted to watch The L Word, to know that there are other people like me out there and that it was okay to be gay. In the 90s, there was no gay books in libraries, and I only found them online. I think not finding any gay books in libraries when I was younger made me feel like something was wrong with me, and it made me want to hide who I was and really not celebrate it.
Thank you so much for that experience, Roxy. Jodan, do you want to go next?
La question, c'est quoi encore? La représentation. OK. So, moi, je suis né en 1960. Ça fait que, à peu près comme ça, il n'y avait pas grand-chose à la télévision ou en nulle part pour représenter qui j'étais. I was a boy from day one with a very girly name, and that kind of traveled through my life very dramatically at times. But the first English book that I read, I was 12, and it was called The Boy Who Could Make Himself Disappear by Kin Platt. And I spotted that word, and I didn't know English, but I only knew basic words. And I saw the spine said disappear boy. And I thought, I want to know. And so I took it out of the library, and the school library, and along with a French English dictionary, and I went at it. It wasn't a very big book, but I did it. It was about a boy who wished he could disappear because his life was traumatic, and he had a speech impediment, and he had terrible parents and whatever. But after that, I found Ursula Le Guin, who was like amazing. And her books were fantasy and explored gender in so many ways, explored society in so many ways, and just stretched the envelope to the maximum. And I just loved it because it just kind of resonated with me as, the world can be different than what appears on the surface. And I just kind of kept in that vein for the rest of my life.
All right. Thank you. I'm especially glad you mentioned Ursula K. Le Guin because she's one of my favorite authors of all time. Trevor, do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, so basically for me, having all the representation, and I've always found it I've struggled with reading since I was little, but I always found like watching TV shows, it was always nice whenever I'd see like, oh, like the gay couples on Disney and stuff, and it kind of showed that, I'm not alone, like my experience is valid. Yeah. I don't know, I'm struggling with to think right now, but yeah. Nice to be recognized and know that I have a voice to share.
Thank you. Carmen, est-ce que vous voulez nous partager votre expérience? Voilà, vous êtes en sourdine, Carmen.
Je suis née à Ottawa, j'ai grandi à Ottawa. Je suis comme les franco-ontariennes de ma génération. Je suis allée à un des 5 couvents qu'il y avait à Ottawa parce qu'à ce moment-là, l'éducation secondaire en français n'était pas payée par la province de l'Ontario. Donc, j'ai eu aucune représentation pendant que je grandissais. Je suis devenue lesbienne, j'avais déjà 30 ans. Puis pour moi, la première expérience de représentation publique d'une lesbienne, c'était le film Desert Heart qui a été montré au Bytown dans les années 80. Et c'était comme une messe. C'était un événement communautaire. C'était, je pense, la première fois que des centaines de lesbiennes qui étaient dans le cinéma se voyaient représentées. C'était incroyable comme expérience parce que il n'y en avait pas à la télé. Moi, j'avais pas conscience qu'il y avait des livres de ce type-là. Alors, ça, c'est ma première expérience de représentation, disons, publique.
Merci beaucoup, Carmen. Angela, do you want to share your experience?
Thank you. I've always been a very avid reader and TV watcher and movie watcher ever since I was very young. And I don't actually remember a lot of queer books when I was growing up. I remember reading a lot of the same books that a lot of girls my age were reading. And I'm going to age myself here, like Sweet Valley High books. Everything is very, very hetero and very romantic. And, I've kind of channeled that into a love of, horror and thriller because I was apparently not getting my needs met. But I think that over the years, it's been really positive for me to be able to see more representation in media of all kinds. Reading Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin and even the Netflix series that came out, I think, a few years ago, that was just such a joy to watch because, the series of books is just so positive and so warm. And if people haven't had a chance to see Tales of the City, if you haven't read it, by all means, check out the Netflix series for sure. Even one of my favorite shows that's more current, Schitt's Creek, where it normalizes, a gay couple, and it's not about their sexuality, it's not about any gender orientation or identities. It's three-dimensional characters who are just living their lives and accepted. So that really speaks more to me than kind of the two-dimensional kind of last thought placement of a queer character. So I am really enthusiastic and very excited anytime I see any queer characters, and I just hope that it kind of continues to develop into what real folks are living. But it has definitely given me hope and people to kind of relate to. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all this. I want to share a little bit of my experience growing up as a queer teen in the 90s. There wasn't a lot out there. In fact, I grew up in Montreal, which is a very large city, and there was one queer bookstore in Montreal, which is gone now. And I remember we would go there, and it was this tiny little bookstore, and they had their their shelf, because it was a singular shelf of queer movies. There was it was VHS, so this thick. You can imagine how many movies there were. And from there, I was like, oh, wow, queer movies are a thing. Like, people like me can exist in stories too. I thought we could just be subtext, like the queerest thing I'd ever read before then was The Vampire Diaries, which, while being super queer, is never explicit in the depiction of that queerness. And I started keeping, I remember I had this spiral bound notebook where every time I found a new queer title on the internet, I would note it there. And I started working at the library 12 years ago. And at that time, I'd made a reading list of all the queer books we had. And I'd read all the queer books we had. And now, if I wanted to do that, I couldn't. There are too many. And I can't describe how happy this makes me that I literally cannot read all the books there are right now because there are so many. And, it's not just they're the tragic coming out stories. It's fantasy with gay wizards and science fiction with lesbian, disabled, polyamorous lovers. It's amazing, the wealth that is out there right now. And it's a thing that I could never imagine even existing when I was a child. So much so that I didn't even think I could write stories with queer protagonists when I started writing as a 12-year-old, because they didn't exist. I thought it was not possible. So it's been just wonderful seeing that change. And I hope that it just keeps diversifying. Our next question that we're going to ask is going to be for the elder generations. So define that as you may. What is, unless someone has something else to say about the representation that you've seen? All right, let's move on to the second question. What is something you would want, like the younger generations, people who are like sort of becoming teenagers, coming of age right now, what is something that you would want them to understand about your experience as an LGBTQIA plus person? Alors, pour les générations qui sont un petit peu plus âgées, un petit peu plus aînées, ce qu'on voudrait savoir, c'est pour la génération là, qui sont en train de devenir des adolescents, des jeunes adultes, qui sont en train de se découvrir eux-mêmes en ce moment. Quel est quelque chose que vous aimeriez qu'ils comprennent à propos de votre expérience en tant que personne 2S LGBTQIA+. On va commencer avec Carmen. C'est Carmen, qu'est-ce que vous aimeriez que les générations vivent de différents, mais qui comprennent de votre génération, de ce que vous avez vécu?
Oui, je pense que ce qui serait intéressant pour les gens de savoir, c'est que il y a encore beaucoup de gens de ma génération qui sont dans le placard. Parce que même si les lois ont changé jusqu'à un certain point, les attitudes ont changé, quand tu as passé 30, 40 ans de ta vie de te cacher, tu ne peux pas sortir du placard. C'est comme tu as pris l'habitude depuis tout ce temps-là. Alors, à OSPN, dans le réseau, on fait des sessions éducatives pour la semaine de la Fierté gay. J'en ai fait 6 présentations dans des résidences pour personnes aînées. Puis tout le monde est convaincu qu'il n'y en a pas. Pourquoi? Parce que ma génération n'ose pas dire de s'affirmer. Donc, je pense que ça peut être difficile pour quelqu'un qui s'est reconnu à 11 ans puis qui a été capable de le dire à ses parents avec plus ou moins d'acceptation, parce que je ne veux pas faire semblant que tout est beau pour les jeunes, là, que c'est difficile de comprendre que pour la grande majorité d'entre nous, on n'est pas sorti du placard avant très longtemps. Moi, je connais personnellement des gens qui ont entendu que leur femme meurt pour se déclarer homme gay, ou ils ont attendu de prendre leur retraite de leur travail pour ne pas perdre leur job. Même si ça fait des décennies que tu ne peux pas perdre ta job parce que tu es gay. Alors, ça l'explique aussi pourquoi on a des enfants, on a des petits-enfants, parce que la grande majorité d'entre nous avons fait des mariages hétérosexuels. Donc, c'est totalement différent de la réalité des jeunes qui peuvent se reconnaître et puis qui peuvent, même les jeunes peuvent devenir parents, même s'ils sont dans des couples de même sexe, qui n'était pas de réalité. Moi, j'ai des amis, des hommes gays qui se sont mariés parce qu'ils voulaient avoir des enfants, se sont mariés à des femmes. Alors, tu sais, c'est un peu comme dire que j'ai été éduquée dans un couvent. Tu sais, c'est comme, il y a tellement un grand écart entre la réalité des gens de ma génération. Mais on n'est pas tous dans le placard. Puis OSPN a été fondé par les militants des années 90. Nous autres, on a lutté pour obtenir le mariage gay. Pensez-vous qu'on veut rentrer dans le placard? Nous autres, on dit non, là. Nous autres, on va travailler pour qu'on puisse continuer à être qui on est. Mais je reconnais que quelqu'un comme moi, là, qui a été présidente d'Égal, je ne suis peut-être pas typique des milliers de seniors LGBTQ qui sont encore cachés.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Jodan, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience?
Well, I have a couple of kids, and one's 19 and one's 23, 22. And I've had it's been like a joy because being a parent, queer, trans man, like I transitioned before, like my transition happened before they were born, like 25 years ago. My oldest is 22. And they only know me as me, but they've also known me, all of me. They know that, you know, there used to be somebody that looked like a woman and now is a man or looks like a man. And so they know all that. They've always known that from the beginning, and they're very cool, you know. And my son refers to everybody as they, and it confuses me. I'm old and I'm used to the binaries, right? But it's getting in there, getting in there. And but you know, when I grew up, I like there was a real crash in my brain about being a guy and looking like a girl. Like I could not accept it or admit it. I even fought with my brothers about it when I was 4 years old, you know? And so it's really important for me to sort of try and get people to be flexible in their thinking and to explore and be curious about life and people and to let people be who they are. And so anytime I interact, you know, with people, even though I'm older, I don't assume that I know everything. And I don't assume that I've been around. And when I talk to younger people, I don't assume that they don't know either. Like, and just because they have access to Google or the internet doesn't mean they know either. And I tried to interact with that perspective and to try and get people to think bigger than that. And to, you know, like, my go-to thing is like, in my head, I go, what if? I just do that. And I try to get people to say, like, I ask them, but what if it was different than what you think? What would that feel like? Or what would that be like? And, you know, I just want people to look deeper and to go from the heart and look at each other from, you know, a compassionate point of view. And so being a trans man, like I have to say, I'm 6'2", and everybody assumes I'm just this old white dude with like assumptions of my privilege and everything. But I had lived through hell. And, you know, and also my expression and my emotionality is kind of female to some guys, you know, like it's like, oh, guys don't do that. It's like, who are you? What are you doing? And sometimes my kids say, Dad. And I just want to remain a child. So inside, I feel like a child still. Like I feel like I'm still the same person I was. And I relate to that. And I relate to my whole life that way. So I try to get the kids to just absorb and be true to yourself.
Thank you. That was really beautiful. Now we tend to define elder in heteronormative societies as, you know, someone who is past a certain age, and someone who is, you know, past a certain age. But in queer circles, I found that elder has a very different meaning. It can mean certainly how old you are and the experiences you've had, but it can also mean like how long you have identified with and belong to the alphabet mafia, as I like to call us. So in that sort of respect, Angela, did you want to share any of your experiences? Because I'm going to share mine.
Sure. I feel like perhaps I'm kind of on a cusp of elder/not. While, as my introduction was saying, I technically identify right now as a later in life lesbian, I had always previously identified as what I thought to be bi at the time. The very first person I ever kissed when I was 7 years old was a girl, and I thought that was super cool. So it's always been part of me. It's always been something I've been very open about. But I happen to be married to a man for 20 plus years. That compulsory kind of heteronormativity. So things that perhaps I would like younger generations to know is you're going to be all right. And you are, kind of shaping the world for even us, slightly elder folks that seeing, you know, my own kids have such a welcoming and accepting attitude with all of their friends, even through all ages of high school and college and university, has really kind of shown me how important it is to, you know, be open-minded. We never stop learning. It's never too late to be your authentic self. It's never too late to stop living in kind of a box that you think is going to be yours forever. And I think that the younger folks are just, they are so lucky that they do have the, you know, resources and the support that they have. And, you know, I do remember where it was still quite shameful to be seen as, you know, as gay. It was still very, you had to be very careful about who you were out with, even though, you know, I would have my own small community. And by community, I mean 3 people that I was comfortable kind of sharing that with. But overall, you can't just be out in public. There's lots of implications. Again, and I feel like we're, you know, on a political level, we're kind of going towards that a little bit. But I think that we have so much knowledge and passion and advocacy with our young folks that, you know, frankly, I admire them, and there's nothing I need to teach them aside from, let's not go back to where we were, you know, 30, 40 years ago or however long. Like, keep the momentum going. So that's it.
Thank you very much. This is important, and I feel like I want to I'm gonna address your living in a box thing, because that was resonated so much with me. So I knew that I was queer, and I knew that I was a boy at a very, very young age. My experience is very similar to Jodan. Like, I did not understand when people were telling me that I was a girl. Like, my parents had to physically wrestle me into a bathing suit instead of swimming trunks when I was like 10, because they were like, you can't do this anymore. And I was like, but why? My cousins are like, why don't they have to wear this? And I didn't understand. Like, I didn't have the words, because I didn't have nobody, like, I didn't know anybody. I hadn't heard that being transgender was even a thing that existed, except that when I was about 14, my grandmother, who was a nurse at a CLSC, which is like a health center in Quebec, she once, I still don't know why she ever said that to me, but she unprompted sort of volunteered, like, oh, there's this woman where I work, and, you know, like, she grew a beard, and she wants me to call her Joe, but, you know, she's always going to be a woman. And I know. And, you know, I didn't know what that meant, because I was too young and I hadn't had that experience. But that interaction has been like sticking with me for like nearly 30 years now. And, you know, the only thing that I knew is that I was different. I was different in a way that would make me as a person unacceptable to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And I'm just hoping that the world that we are creating and the work that we're putting out there is making it so that fewer young people are having that experience of feeling unacceptable to the people who are supposed to love and protect them. And yeah, my grandfather came out as gay after having 7 children, and he had a very difficult life. And so did his wife and children, you know. And he, by the time he did, he was dealing with severe depression and substance abuse, and he didn't live very much longer. And, you know, these are all like experiences that, again, I'm seeing younger people sort of go online and say, I don't know, I'm trying this identity this week. What do you think? Do you think I can call myself this? Do you think? And you know, and they have like these supportive strangers who are all like, well, why not? Why not try this? And why not try that? And it's just beautiful. And I wish there was more writing about how much the internet has changed our means of finding each other, of finding out who we are, of finding that we are not alone, we're not broken, we're not you know, completely isolated in our experience, and there are others who are not only like us, but they're thriving and loved and successful. I wish I had that when I was a child. And another thing that I feel like I would like some of our younger generations to understand too is how devastating AIDS was. I know that it's something we talk about sometimes, but it's, you know, when I came of age and I understood myself as a queer man, even though I didn't have the body and I couldn't explain it to my peers who, like, most of my friends were queer men, and they sort of, you know, sort of accepted me as this, even though like it wasn't, we didn't really have the words for it. And the way that we didn't have any elders, we knew one person who was our arts teacher, who was very much not allowed to talk to us about this stuff. And you know, the others, when we went out to the village, it was, there's this concept of family and handing down knowledge in queer circles where you're not born to a family that is like you. When you're queer, you have to find your own family because your experience doesn't resonate with the people who raise you because it's not their experience. And in that way, it's very different than being like a racialized or religious minority where you sort of evolve with people who share your experience of oppression. But when you're queer, you have to go and you find that family. And for generations, it's been like, you know, like drag queens have this. They have drag families, they have drag moms, and all of these things, and they form these very close family ties. And in the 90s and 80s, when we were reaching out, people were scared, or they were dying, or they were dead. And so much of our culture and knowledge and everything that makes a community was lost and not transmitted because of that. And that's something that I feel indescribable loss about. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't know I was gonna get emotional. We have questions for the younger participants. So it's kind of the same question. As young people who are, you know, sort of, well, relatively young, we're coming into who you are, or coming of age, coming into adulthood with like a sense of your identity. What do you wish us older folks understood about your generation's reality? Let's start with Trevor this time.
So definitely one thing I'd encourage that some of the elders knew about younger generations is just let people be who they are. People are going to take their time to figure out like what they want to be, who they are. I know growing up, like I tried, you know, playing soccer. I tried playing hockey with some of the other like boys, and that wasn't me. Like, you know, sometimes you just need to let people be who they are, and eventually you're gonna find your way and find your own happiness, and you know, kind of build your own community off of that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Roxy?
I think the best advice I can give the younger generation is that it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it. And the best thing that you can do is to find your people. Like you said about, drag queens having drag families. Like, just find the people that you connect with, that you feel safe with, and those people will guide you and get you to where you want to go in life, and they'll be your support system.
Thank you. That's really great. Angela, you mentioned something about the box. Sometimes. You want to tell us a little bit more about that before I go on a tiny rant?
A rant. I can't wait. Um, I I guess I'll try and keep it very brief. And I can only speak for myself, but I know that this probably resonates with many people. Is that you kind of grow up and you kind of have this vision for yourself, what your life is going to be like or what you would like it to be like. And I don't regret any of how my life has turned out, because every choice that I made has led me to where I am today, which is a much happier person. I have a wonderful relationship with both of my adult children who are 23 and 25, my ex-partner of 20 plus years. I have a wonderful partner. My life is good. I'm very, very grateful. And if all of those things that I had to go through got me to this point, that's great. But I felt myself, this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago at this point. I felt like it was almost like a balloon inflating inside of a box. That, I got to a point where, I realized that, I really preferred, women or anybody but cis men, really. And that while my life was okay and there was, my relationship was good, it was not tumultuous in any way, but I could not continue going on in my life as I was. I needed to be able to breathe and to, even if I was air quotes blowing up my life, I needed to be able to, be true to myself and be able to be a good role model for my kids and people around me, to be able to say, like, it's okay to live your life and it's okay to learn who you are. And I can't not do that anymore. So I just kind of got to this point where it's like, I can't pretend anymore. It's too draining. And yeah, that was my realization. The box.
I feel like as human beings, part of what has made our survival so well made, I guess, is our ability to put things in boxes. Like, oh well, these things are poisonous. We don't approach them. These things are predators. We don't approach them. These things are tasty. We eat them. It's very important to be able to categorize things, because you need to be able to put these things in categories to be able to have, thought processes about them and about like your safety or belonging relative to those things. And I think that sometimes this ability that our brains have is super helpful, but it also plays against us, because it can lead us to try to limit ourselves to these sort of parameters. And the box for me, it was certainly being like a straight girl, which was not a box I ever fit in comfortably, since I had like words and autonomy. Or like, but then it also was like queer woman that didn't fit either. And then I tried many different things, and what I see happening a lot online, because I am terminally online, is I see a lot of young people, pretty young, like 13, 14, coming into forums and going like, does that mean I'm transgender? Does that mean I'm a lesbian? Does that mean I'm bisexual? Should I use bisexual? Should I use pansexual? Should I use, whatever label? And a thing that I find is that labels they're essential, but they're also not everything. And something that has helped me think of labels is, instead of seeing them as a box and you need to fit yourself into all of the condition that this box sort of wants to put around you, I like to think of them like hashtags. You can have them. You can have as many as you like. And the thing about having them is, when you click on them, you see all of the content that is related to that. So for example, if I go like hashtag transgender, well, I'm going to find other people who are transgender. If I'm hashtag pansexual, I'm going to find other people who identify as pansexual. And maybe people use pansexual and bisexual interchangeably and others don't, and it matters to them, and that's okay. And the only people I feel that should be able to tell you whether or not you get to use a name for yourself to find your other people is you. Like, there's no other anyway, that's my definition. I would love to hear what other people find of what other people think of labels, how helpful they've been, how maybe not helpful they've been, for each of you. So, Jodan, I see you're.
Yeah, because neurologically, humans are kind of like, we have biases from the day we're born. We start to categorize everything, right? And it's a real struggle to get off track. And what I see is like the algorithm will feed you whatever you seem to have an interest in. And in some cases, that totally takes you in a different world. Like I have a brother who was never interested in politics, who's now a Trump fan and a real, it's like, and I still talk to him and I still struggle to talk to him and I still work on it. And that's what I think is like important, because I say, you know, like, what about all this like crazy anti-trans stuff? Like, what the fuck? You know, like I can't, you know, like I can't imagine. I say, no, what about me? Like, do you think that's like, you know, I should die or something? Like, do you think I should never be who I am or what? He says, well, that's different. And it's like, well, no, man. It's like, you know what? Everybody is lovable. Everybody is valuable. Everybody is worth living who they are. You can't be thinking in general terms about everybody, and you can't put people in boxes and then stop looking anywhere else. Like you can't do that. And so I keep pushing against these kind of like firm beliefs. And a friend of mine who's friends with a little girl next door who came to her and said, my friend is non-binary. And Lori said, well, how do you know that? And she said, because she loves girls. And, you know, in my mind, I was like, that's very sad, because it's like, it's very, you know, like, it's like, okay, there's male and female. Men love women, you know, like that whole thing. And this little girl is thinking that and confused by it. And, you know, like everybody want you to be something. They want to sort their own mind out. So they want you to be something. And then the next time they see you, you have to be the same thing you were yesterday. And in my world, it's like, whoever you are right now, that's who you are. And tomorrow you will have lived an extra day and you will be somebody different, just like me. And so I just feel like, leave the kids alone. Everybody can be who they are and just have fun. Like, I mean, just explore everything. It's all worth looking into, you know? That's it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Trevor, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, not really that much. Can't really think of anything at the moment. Really just do your best, try and be happy and accept everyone as they are, and just, yeah. So.
Awesome. Roxy, what about you? Labels and boxes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a coming out story because I was always just myself. And I mean, in the 90s, it was either you were gay or lesbian. And like growing up, I mean, it really hurt me to be put in a box and to be labeled as a lesbian, because I just wanted to be myself. And being labeled as, you know, a lesbian or being labeled as gay made me feel that I was different and that I wasn't like anyone else. So yeah, I don't really like labels at all.
And that's totally fair. You know, for me, labels were, well, I came out pre-internet, so we were very rare. Turns out we're not so much. Carmen, what about you?
Although I agree with what people have said generally about labels, I find that we've got to be careful about our reluctance to use labels. And I'm going to use the example of someone from my generation. Clémence Desrochers is a major Quebec star. And she published her autobiography recently. And now she's giving interviews saying she doesn't want to be seen as a lesbian because that's just a label. And I view that as internalized homophobia. I think that, you know, if you're going to come out or people out you, unfortunately, or whatever, I don't think it's helpful for your growth as a human being or for our community to then reject who you are by saying, I don't like labels. So I think there's something that, yes, generally labels are boxes and restrictive, but I would question if you're so reluctant to be seen as a member of our community because that's labeling.
I definitely, yeah, that's a very, very good point. And it's a very difficult question because we also have, for example, I'm thinking about the Netflix series Heartstopper, which is a huge success. It's a huge hit. It's like this romance with teen, it's queer boy romance. I've not personally watched it, but I hear really great things about it. But what happened was one of the actors, who stars in it, he's not very much older than a teen himself. I think he's like 18 or 19, and he was basically bullied online into having to come out because people were like, well, are you gay? Well, are you gay? Like, and I have so many mixed feelings because coming from a background of like, there was no one who was like me. There was no representation. There were no celebrities who were queer, to the extent that like I would basically seek out celebrities who like I understood as queer just to like admire them, just to know that people did make it. So I see like there's a real need to see ourselves represented in people who are famous. And at the same time, I understand the reluctance of wanting to be sort of typecast or shoved into a box that maybe you don't feel like you fit. And it's a very complex problem. And I feel there's not going to be a solution that fits everyone in all situations. And I definitely hear what you're saying, Carmen. Angela, do you have thoughts on this?
I just want to
go for it, Jodan.
Yeah, like I just think there's no such thing as I just think. Okay, that's what I'm thinking right now. This idea of like Carmen, this idea of like internalized homophobia and representation and stuff like that. I see that online a lot. People kind of like, like kind of like come down on somebody as soon as they come out or as soon as they do something. Everybody's like, and we want, we want people to identify themselves. We want our community. We want our people to be, and I don't know, like I was in a relationship with a woman, and when I transitioned, I was like, oh my God, that's not her identity anymore. And my thing was like, wow, where's the love in that? And what happened to, what we had? What happened to all that? Like and to be attached to that so fiercely that it's so important what everybody else thinks that, like it impacts your family, your relationships. And I don't know, like I just find that we have to let people be who they are and to identify as whoever they want and to accept them for what they are. And like it feels like you have to do that because I did it, or we have to do that, or I have to do that. That kind of stuff is really kind of restrictive and limiting of our own selves, in our way we think. So I think that my kid's mom's identity was more important, than the love or the relationship or that whole thing switched. And I can understand how that would switch in some ways, because if I think, okay, if I'm going to be, would I be in a relationship with this kind of person or that kind of person? Like, I'm not really attracted to, you know, sort of masculine women, but I'm attracted to more feminine women, but that kind of stuff. Like, it's all about, you know, and if I think about that over time, okay, I can kind of get it, but it's too bad.
Thank you, Jordan. Angela, did you have something to add on labels and boxes?
Yes, thank you. I think that labels and micro labels, as you were mentioning earlier, Nathan, I think are really helpful for the individual. I think that however someone wants to be able to kind of find their identity, whether it's an identity for a period of time or a new identity that they're taking on for the rest of their lives, something that kind of speaks to a person, I think that those are really helpful. But I also have learned that they can be very restrictive, as Jordan was saying, that it should be more about, you know, the person and your experience and, you know, our evolution as humans. And while it's really great for us to see representation, I have that struggle with, I want to see more representation. I want people to be part of our community. I want to see more and more people, but we're also not owed representation. No one needs to attach themselves to the community. We're not owed that. People have the right to exist in their own lives, however they choose to do. So it's wanting to, that balance sometimes is really hard. I want people to be able to come out and be proud of who they are and be role models for future people. But I also want them to just be a happy person who, you know, orders pizza on a Tuesday night and likes to, you know, cuddle up with a blanket and a book. And that's just who they are. And that's okay too. So anyway, it's a struggle.
Definitely. Thank you so much. We are almost at time, but I do have one more question for the panel. If you'd like to answer it, we're going to depart from identity and labels and everything. And I'm going to ask you about libraries. Alors, je vais poser une question à propos des bibliothèques. Libraries have been for me at least, and for a lot of people, a safe space. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your personal experience with libraries, but also about what libraries could do better to serve tous LGBTQIA+ people. Alors, je vais vous demander de nous parler un peu de votre expérience avec les bibliothèques, mais aussi de comment les bibliothèques, qu'est-ce que les bibliothèques peuvent faire mieux pour servir la population de LGBTQIA+. Alors, on va y aller avec quelqu'un. Trevor. Oh, Carmen, allez-y, vous avez votre main levée, allez-y.
Yes, I wanted to make sure that I honor an OPL librarian. His name is Philip Robert. He retired January of this year. In the 1990s, he was getting gay books into OPL. And as I was preparing for this panel, I got in contact with him. I got in contact with another OPL librarian who put me in contact with Philip. And he said that OPL has always been very supportive. He got no pushback in the 90s from OPL about increasing, the gay books. And it was so important for us. At the time, there was an organization called Pink Triangle Services. That is now called Kind. And they used to have a library. And it's the kind of place that we used to go secretly because, Philip gradually informed us that OPL had gay books, but some of us felt that if we borrowed a gay book from OPL, it would say so on billboards, right? So the fact that this guy was inside the system working for us to be able to get, the representation that we wanted Plus, at the time, we had to have a secret source of gay books, which was the PTS library. I mean, it's so different from our life in 2013. Just like, you know, there used to be a bunch of gay bars, and now we'd have trouble, you know, identifying even a small number. Why? Because we're welcome in so many places that, you know, I came out going to a clandestine bar under the Rideau Center called the Coral Reef, right? And I mean, the world is so different now that the clandestinity for the community is not necessary. I think it's still necessary for some individuals for whom it's really hard to come out. I have a friend of my generation whose kids won't talk to him because they're now fundamentalists, right? So, I mean, I don't want to, you know, have this thing about it was so hard for us, but so easy for you. No. But, you know, I did want to make sure that Philip Robert was honored for the role that he played at OPL. And I'll end by saying, you know, my succursale is Saint Laurent, and they have a huge display of kids' books in the community center outside the library of gay books for gay pride. And inside the library, they have a lot of gay books on display. And they've had that for the last month. So, I mean, like, do I feel welcome when I go into that library? Absolutely. So thank all of you.
Thank you so much, Carmen. This is delightful to hear. And not only because Philip was the person who hired me. All right. Wants to go next? I was going to point out Trevor. So do you have, would you like to say something? Yes, go for it.
So definitely kind of my experience with like the library and stuff. 3 years ago, I was in a terrible mental space working at a dead-end job where 90% of the time I was by myself. I had terrible management. The store was shit. But one thing that let me escape was listening to audiobooks. Now, couldn't technically have headphones while I was working, so I did anyway. And eventually it boiled to a point where I needed to get out. And I found my one escape was through reading. A lot of them were kind of more queer-oriented books or just like cool adventure books. And by the time I left, I had read like 63 books while working. And a lot of the time I just stand there just like as I'm stocking cooler and just have to pause and just listen to the like very like emotional speeches and kind of learning, just hearing like the good stories from some of the elders. And it led me to still be around today. So
that's amazing to hear. Not amazing to hear that it was not a great job, but amazing to hear that the power of fiction and representation. Also, I knew someone who also got away with having headphones because of your haircut, which is unfortunately something I can't do. All right. Jodan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, like for me, libraries, well, we moved around a lot, but school libraries were kind of my place to be. No queer stuff ever, but lots of fantasy. And I just found them to be the most diverse and interesting places in the world for me. No matter where I went, I could go to a library, just get into it. And I didn't have to talk to anyone. But now, if you're asking me what the libraries could do, I think libraries should be good places to talk. You should have conversation sessions where people could just go and say, you know, have a little room there where people are talking, say the topic today is this, come and talk, or, you know, have that going on every few hours, change it, do that kind of stuff so that people can actually meet other people through their interests and their reading. That's it.
It's a great idea. I'm filing it away in my head. Roxy, what about you?
My experience of libraries has always been positive since they were a space for me to hide in high school. But I don't think libraries should be a place where people should go to hide. People should feel welcomed and safe to explore all kinds of books. Something I think you can do to improve is having a 2S LGBTQI plus section, and sometimes having a gay flag sticker on your door that says everyone is welcome here can help people know that the library is a safe place for them. My sister is the manager at Indigo in Montreal, and she fights with management every day to ensure that the 2S LGBTQI plus section is not hidden in the back of the bookstore, but in the front of the store, so that we can be celebrated and welcomed. Having various queer books visible when you walk in, I think, will help the community feel welcome and help society as a whole learn more about our community.
Thank you so much, Roxy. It's good to know that we're making all the good efforts with the representation and flags and stuff. It's very, very important. You know, it's funny because having that little sticker in a door will tell me that I'll be safe there. And you know, if it's something that doesn't matter to you, then it doesn't have any impact on your life. So it's a good thing to have for sure. Angela?
I love everything to do with libraries. I wish I worked in a library. I love books. I love everything. And I like what Roxy was saying. I spent a lot of time in libraries in high school, and were often more kind than some people. And it has kind of blown my mind not having regular access to a library as a grown-up, where we're not in a school with a library or going to the library on the regular, but how much library services have expanded. It's not just about having books or being the gatekeeper for information. There's workshops, there's all kinds of different things that take place at the library, the different types of media that are available, 3D printers, all kinds of different things that I think that perhaps some older folks aren't quite as aware or of all the diverse services that are there. But I've never been in any library where I feel unsafe. I think that the people who tend to work at libraries are very open-minded and diverse and interested in having people engage with their services. And I think, libraries have kind of gotten to that, cool niche point where now there's like a sitcom about librarians on, is it CBC? It's called Shelved, I think. So I just appreciate everything that the library has to offer, and I wish more people just took advantage of all the services. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm just reading the comments. Oh, speed dating for friends. That's cool. Okay, I'm also filing that away in my head. Well, we are just a little over time. We don't seem to have any questions in the chat. So I will take this opportunity before we're wrapping up the subject on libraries to say, my experience with libraries has been much of the same as you. I've hidden in it since I was very young, and I don't know, they saw me sticking around so much they actually gave me a job. That's not how it happened, but I kid. So libraries, I feel, and this is something that I've been working at a library for so long that I tend to forget that it's not like this in the real world, is queer people are so drawn to libraries. I feel like we're very overrepresented in the staff of the library. So, if you want to go to a public library, it's not only likely that the staff there will be an ally, but it's very likely that you'll find someone like you working behind the counter too. And it's been amazing to work with an employer that I feel, when I when I came out as transgender and I transitioned, there was no question in my mind that I was going to be accepted, that I was going to keep my job, and that it was going to be relatively easy to change my name, pronouns, all of the things. In contrast, my partner, who worked in the private sector and transitioned around the same time as I did, in Quebec, transgender people were only protected by the Canadian Charter starting, I think, 2016. So when my partner transitioned at her workplace of 5 years, where she'd won literal awards, she was let go. And it's even though she'd been through that experience, my experience I knew would be different because of where I worked. And yeah, libraries are amazing. And while we're at it, did you know libraries have books, audiobooks, ebooks, DVDs, video games, telescopes, musical instruments, museum passes where you can take your whole family to the museum for free? Did you know we have all databases? We have streaming video. We have downloadable music. All of this, if you watch a lot of YouTube and they're like, oh, you should go on Skillshare. Well, we've got a database that's just like that and it's free. It's called LinkedIn Learning. So, get your library card. Go online, bibliottawalibrary.ca. You can make your library card online and then you can finalize it in branch. And then if you're antisocial a little bit like I am, you can use the library from home and you don't even have to come in. Yes, Trevor, that's the card right there. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, definitely, this is my spiel for the library. I talk about the library 24/7, even though it's not really my job. And I wish more people knew about all the amazing resources. So yeah, job finding tools, programs, workshops. Thing that we now have is we no longer charge any late fees. So if you have a book out and you didn't make it in and you return it a few days late, you don't have to worry about being blocked from borrowing more things because you have fines on your account. We just don't do that anymore. Obviously, if you never bring it back, we're going to eventually charge you for the book. But then when that happens and you do bring it back, we're going to say, thank you so much for bringing it back. And you're not going to be charged anything. We just want people to come in and be able to use the resources that we have, because we're the last place where you just get to exist without having to buy stuff. I don't know if anyone has any questions in the chat. I didn't see any. I'm going to give you like 1 more minute to maybe post your question if you have one. And if nobody has questions, I'm going to say a huge, huge thank you to all of our wonderful participants. It's been really interesting to see all of the varied points of view from, different generations. I want to thank the audience for coming and for putting all those comments in the chat. It was really interesting comments and discussions going on in there. Don't forget bibliottawalibrary.ca to get your library card. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for this conversation. This has been very, very interesting. And for those of you who are restreaming, we're watching this on YouTube when it's going to be posted later tonight. Always come and visit bibliottawalibrary.ca. We have many different programs. We have online and in-person programs. So make sure to check out our website. And that takes us to the end of our conversation. Thank you again so much, everyone, for coming, and have a great afternoon. Bye.